Bruins Beat is brought to you by PrizePicks and the GameTime app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by PrizePicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play, just $5. And presented by GameTime. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. I like the hat. I like the beanie. BU men's hockey. So UMass got a W over them this weekend, though. So.
They sure did. Wasn't particularly close, but it's all right. We have the they do have the Belfast Cup, so we at least we're winning in other countries. So
the Bell Pot
being at Agganis, being in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's not going so hot right now, but baby steps.
Hey, you know what? You're like Pitbull.
Exactly,
Mr. Worldwide. You're great on the road. That's what you're good at, and you just gotta keep playing games in other countries, which is not a terrible thing to do. Like if that's your thing, just keep scheduling games in other countries, and
not a good strategy though. If most of your games are in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
no,
so
it's not.
Work in progress. They're getting there, but
they're getting there. Good roster. Speaking of unfortunate news for people in Boston. UMass winning is a great thing, but Juan Soto goes to the Mets, and people are thinking, oh my God, here go Evan and Connor again, talking about something that has nothing to do with the Bruins, and obviously, yes, has nothing to do with the Bruins, although Soto would have been a great guy to like drop a ceremonial first puck or something like that.
Yes.
But before we get into sort of the Bruins turning the corner of late and some good signs and all that stuff, you brought this up to me and Ty on Monday. I thought it was interesting of, when were the times that the Bruins were heavily in on a big ticket free agent and missed? Because they hit on Chara, they hit on Mark Savard. Those are the two famous ones. We can go into Lindholm and Zadorov at another time. But there's one big one, I think, that the Bruins were in on and missed. It was John Tavares. Seems like just yesterday, low-key, like 6 or 7 years ago now. Isn't that insane?
I know. Yeah, that photo of him, like, sleeping and, like, all the covers were all, like, Maple Leaf stuff. I feel like that was yesterday. I remember when that happened, he signed, and that tweet came out, like, immediately from a reporter. And I think everyone's eyes collectively rolled into the back of their heads. But that feels like it was yesterday, and it was, what, July 1st, I assume, like, 2018?
It was 18. It was 2018.
Yeah, so.
Isn't that insane? It was 2018.
It was, like, quick.
And the funny part is, like, you look back at that, and everyone around here wanted him bad. Because, again, it was sort of like, all right, Krejci wasn't falling off, but I don't remember that 17-18 year being huge for Krejci, if memory serves, points-wise. And him and Bergeron were getting older, and it was very much, okay, what's the next wave going to be? And Tavares looked like that guy. Tavares was like, okay, good two-way center. Like, this guy's a Bruin. And Krejci went on, I think, have his best year or second best year of his career in 2018-19. And that core ended up doing great. The Leafs struggled forever to get past the first round. And Tavares has sort of fallen off a bit in Toronto. And, again, like Krejci had a solid year 2 years ago when he came back. I don't think Tavares has had quite a year like that in recent memory. So, like, it ended up working out for the Bruins. They sort of dodged a bullet. It is interesting to think of, like, what history would be like had they not, like, would they have traded Krejci? Like, how would that have worked? I think it's a fascinating sort of what if.
Yeah, in terms of, what the next move would be. Because as you said, like, is Krejci getting traded? And who knows? Maybe, like, Krejci's still here and John Tavares is the guy that can also kind of play the wing as well. Like, if you have that much talent, you find ways to plug guys in. I mean, hell, if you don't trade Krejci, which I don't know how you make the money work, but, David Krejci was had such a strong year in 18-19, but also, like, he had Carson Coleman on his right side, right? Like,
that's right.
Who knows how that would have changed? And it is fascinating to see, like, I feel like the Bruins are more tied to, like, trade targets in terms of players. You're like, I wish they got that guy. Like, even I think that 18-19 year, he had a whole bunch of players, like, within that span where it's a lot of what ifs, like whether it's Tavares with free agency, that trade deadline before that, they were in on Ryan McDonough, who ends up going through the light. And that would have changed a whole lot of things, having a guy like that. And then that deadline, again, the Bruins thing had a really strong deadline getting guys like Charlie Coyle, Marcus Johansson, all them. But Mark Stone was the big guy that, it's so fun when you look back on that. And this is what happens, I think, every year when the Bruins or any team are in these trade talks. You're like, oh, the asking price is astronomical. So we're like, oh, man, it's going to be DeBrusque or Frederick or like Jack Studnicka, who is a top prospect. Again, shows you where that goes. But, that was supposed to be a king's ransom. And then he goes to the Golden Knights, and it's like for Emil Benstrom. That guy stinks.
I know.
Shows you how these things work out in terms of what exactly is the coveted returns. But if you had to say free agency, yeah, without a doubt, in terms of like a white whale, it's Tavares probably, at least in recent history. The one guy that trade-wise, I'm like, man, really wish that was a situation they got the guy. I think it's a guy like Stone. You probably win in 19, and hell, I know he's got injury issues, but hey, it helps your LTIR. But
Damn right.
When he's playing, there's few guys I enjoy watching more than Mark Stone. Guy's just a beast.
I agree. Stone is the big one because that one would have changed everything for you. Would have been a guy on the right side, another veteran leader, guy's a gamer in the playoffs, like plays your style of hockey, physical, all that stuff. He would have made a lot of sense. Tavares, again, as we said, and I think free agency in general in the NHL is so much different than that in the MLB, where like you don't have those big fish making it to free agency almost ever because they're either re-signed or they're dealt before they hit free agents. Like Noah Hannafin would have been a big one this offseason, but he was traded and then re-signed. Like, again, lot of these...
Look at like Stamkos in like 16, right? Where he that was like, I know he obviously signed with Nashville this year, but he's at the stage of his career. Would be a nice signing for a lot of teams, but he's not what he was. In 16, he was like in the prime of his career. People are like, wow, is he going to go to Toronto? Like, is another team getting involved? And I think it like start of free agency was noon or something like that. And he signed at like 12:01 back with Tampa. So again, like
spent 1 minute on the open market.
Exactly. Like for every Tavares, there's 200 guys that are really intriguing free agent candidates, don't even get to the market. Or if they do, they go right back to where they are. So
yeah, I mean, again, in a sport like baseball, you might see like a Leon Draisaitl hit free agency and not quite in hockey. Like they're not hitting them. So interesting, just kind of question that you brought up, and I thought was good. Bruins turning the corner of late, 7-2 since firing Jim Montgomery. They get the win against Philadelphia on Saturday, come from behind win, 4-3 overtime W. I actually listened to the entire second half of the game on radio. I was driving down to St. George's, so I felt like it was the 1920s. Like I'm like gathered around the radio, like, oh, let's listen to RJ and Beersy.
Your Model T, yes,
yeah, just like gathered round, like with I'm imagining it's like the Great Depression, so like no heat, we're under like a blanket, we're eating
Elitist
like crumbs
Evan driving his Model T through Hooverville, yeah,
exactly. Oh, you guys can't listen to this. Oh, sorry, bye. You guys want food? See ya.
Yes,
not quite that. Driving down to St. George's of all places, just like the elite of the elite prep schools. But I'm not surprised they won that game. They had a ton of chances in the first. They had a ton of chances in the second. I knew, they're down 2-0 after the first, but felt like they had a lot of opportunities. And then they start to finally convert in that third. And I think that's kind of been emblematic of them the last 9 games, where like they're playing well. They're getting a lot of chances. They're not necessarily all going in, but you're getting guys to step up. I mean, you look like Marchand, 3 goals in his last 2 games. Pasternak, a goal and 4 assists in his last 4 games. Zacha has 2 OT winners. Lowry quietly, 4 assists in the last 3 games. I think he's your top scoring D at the moment. Frederick gets 2 against Philly. It just feels like things are coming up, and I think that's good.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just a step in the right direction. We can look at the strength of schedule, all those things, right? And yes, that is a valid maybe way to pump the brakes a little bit, but I just look at where the Bruins were a few weeks ago to compare to now, and it's night and day. And you can say whoever they matched up against, you're getting wins. And I think you look at how much the Bruins struggled, especially in the third periods of games under Montgomery over those last couple of weeks. That game on Saturday felt like if it was a few weeks ago, yeah, you go with the whimper. Like you can't score, on your home ice in the third period for over a month, right? Or it was October 10th was their home opener. They didn't score another third period goal till December 1st. not great, not a really winning formula there. But yeah, that's a game where the Bruins, if it was a few weeks ago, they probably come out the short end against, again, a Flyers team that's not great, but still you should be like, for them to come back and kind of control play there late in the game. Again, it wasn't perfect. You had the Flyers committed 8 penalties. You only kind of buried 1 power play goal, so it's not perfect. They're not playing a full 60 minutes. Again, even if the Bruins are collecting points, let's say they go on this road trip and keep on winning, I don't expect like a couple of nice 4-1 games where everything clicks and like, all right, we're rolling now. I think it's going to be pretty ugly games. That's kind of how they have to win these games. But listen, I think Bruins fans should be more happy they're collecting wins than, finishing with 1 point or no points in the standing. So I just think, as you said, you look at the way several players are stepping up. A lot of the team-wide shooting percentage regression has seemingly improved a little bit. You've got Pavel Zacha is now just an overtime closer, apparently. I do think it's just encouraging that, yes, it's not perfect, but look at where this team is compared to where it was in the middle of November. Things are improving, and I think if you're a Bruins fan, you should be happy with that for right now.
It's funny. I tweeted that Dunk's breakfast sandwich analogy, and I came so close. I think it was Saturday morning. I had a Dunk's breakfast sandwich, and I almost tweeted a picture like, "Oh, hanging out with the Bruins this morning," but didn't think enough people would get it, and I didn't want to seem like an absolute maniac. But some people were replying like, "Oh, well, this seems more like a plain bagel," and like I had one of my friends almost ratio me with his burner. I was like, "Jesus Christ!" But what? Like, I get people's sentiment, and we talked about this when they first fired Jim Montgomery and promoted Joe Sacco, was like, well, their schedule coming up is kind of soft, and if they do really well, people are going to say, well, the schedule was soft. But all along, I think we've held firm, and like, what's wrong with that? Like, this team needed a soft portion of the schedule, and hey, maybe they go out west and get their doors blown off, and we go, you know what? This team is a middle-of-the-pack team. It'll probably be a wild card or somewhere around there. But you needed this stretch to sort of get right. You were not above any of these teams. You're not better. This is not last year where it's like, oh, we got Montreal and Detroit and Chicago. Wow, this is easy. I mean, yeah, all these games were close, but you still won them. And good teams win those games. And I'm not saying that they're Cup contenders now. No one is saying that they're Stanley Cup contenders because they're not. They're nowhere near that. But they're better. They're in a better spot than they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think that's the most encouraging thing. And it's up to them for this West Coast trip, which we'll get to in a second. Like that, this is a test. This is a real free. You got some heavy hitters you're going to be facing out west, not to mention you're on the road for all those games. But, I get the whole like, oh, the schedule's easy, but like that shouldn't discredit what they've been able to do over the last couple weeks because they were one of the worst teams in the league. Statistically, somehow they weren't record-wise, but every statistic, they're one of the worst teams in the league, and they've improved. And look, we bashed them the first month, more than anybody. But I think what's the reality of what's happening now is they seem to be rerouting.
Yeah, no, and again, just look at the eye test or just the way some of these games have gone. Like even if you look at who they're playing, at least they're not getting like blown out of games where they've just been completely uncompetitive. Like there are games, whether it's like the one in Dallas, the one in Carolina against good teams, but even like the third period of that game against Ottawa, you don't get a shot on goal, or the game that got Montgomery fired against a very bad Columbus team where the Bruins just weren't competitive. Like even if these games right now that they're winning aren't the most riveting, or there's they're not controlling play for a full 60 minutes. They're competitive. They're playing to their strengths. They're being involved. They're engaged physically. I think 3 of the last 6 games they've got over 30 hits, and that's not a end all be all in terms of how dominant you are in a game. But
yeah, they're tough.
But like you're seeing, I think, more of an identity with this team right now. And again, like you can keep on pointing at the schedule, and yes, it's not going to change unless they, if they win, if they go 4-1 on this road trip, then you're like, all right, like you start feeling good about your game. And there's going to be that reservation and that doubt. But for right now, I think you just have to be happy with where this team is, and they're not, completely, they're not on the wrong end of these completely lopsided games, which is what you saw time and time again over the first stretch of the year. I mean, their first 20 games, 5 of them, they gave up 5+ goals. They haven't given up more than 3 in a game now. And again, You can look at who they're playing, but look at the eye test of how I think more structured they've been, how much tougher they've been in terms of making things tougher on the opposition. I think it's been night and day from what you've seen so far. And if you continue that against teams like Winnipeg and Vancouver and Edmonton that can light the lamp pretty regularly, that's where I think you take that next step as to whether this identity and this buy-in can translate against tougher teams.
Yeah, and again, like that identity feels more like a Bruce Cassidy-led team, which I find interesting, which a guy like Sacco's implemented, where we talked about this when Sacco was hired, of being sort of, you've been there for 3 guys. What's worked? That identity worked. I also look at the losses they had, 7-2, the 2 losses. The 2-1 loss to Pittsburgh was bad on Black Friday. Like, we can all admit that was not great. You did have a lot of chances, but like still not great.
That was frustrating. Yeah.
The Vancouver game was at the time you wanted to poke your eyes out, but like they should have won that game. They had a number of chances. They played a really solid game, which again, I'm not saying that that's good. I'm not going to chalk up losses as wins, but it wasn't 5-1.
Yeah.
And that's a step in the right direction. Speaking of steps in the right direction, PrizePicks is always a step in the right direction because it's the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Connor, Bruins are going out west. Games are going to be a little later. People might be falling asleep during them, which like happens. Not to mention that the Bruins are also not the highest event team in the world. So maybe a way, use my brain here, maybe a little way to keep yourself a little more invested, doing some prize picks during the game. Keeps you in it. Keeps you on the edge of your seat. A little more into it, especially for these late games. Like, it is hard. It gets to be like 11:30 and you're like just entering the third period and it's, this keeps you in. So if you want to do that, sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That can carry you the entire West Coast road trip. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Run on out to Winnipeg and Edmonton and Vancouver and all those.
Just layer up. It's a little chilly.
Please do. Oh, like this time of year, that's a tough swing. Ooh, freaking cold. The real test, though. This is where you kind of put everything to the test that you got out of your system, winning 7 of your last 9 games. You got Winnipeg, you got Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. All 5 are on the road. Obviously there are going to be some losses in there. Like, I don't think we're going to have any games like in 22-23 when they were outshot like 100-0, 100-2 against Calgary and won. Like, you're not going to see any of that. But I do think if they continue the same identity, right? More defensive, trying to win low score games, getting good goaltending, playing good defense. Again, all cliche, but wasn't there the first month, so you can't get on us for being too generic. I think you have a pretty good shot against these teams. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to sticking with that identity of just being really stingy in the defensive zone, not giving up a lot of quality chances, and seeing where that kind of takes you and how competitive you can be in these games. Like, I'm not trying to put in qualifiers, but you look at just how high-powered some of these teams are, whether it's Winnipeg. And I know they've kind of tailed off a little bit since going 14, 0-0, whatever it was. Like, they've
going full Bruins.
Yeah, which is to be expected in terms of just how strong they were to start the year. But you look at that team and the forward core they have, obviously Edmonton, Vancouver. You got a lot of teams that can really bury you if you're sloppy defensively. So, like, obviously the most important thing is coming away with wins. But if they go to like Edmonton and it's a 3-2 overtime loss or something like that, I view that as at least a positive. If you're the Bruins, I think if your identity is just being a tough out, and again, it goes back to what I've said of like, maybe this team needs to be like the 21 Islanders where it's low event, boring, but if you stay in these 1-goal games and it's hockey and it's a friggin' crapshoot and you keep it close and it's a bounce or two goes your way, that's kind of what you need. So again, I'm not saying like I'm going to be happy this team goes 1-1-3 on this road trip, right? But I think when you look at the personnel that they're matched up against, if they can keep up this, it's one thing to stick to this identity and see the results when it's teams like Detroit and the Flyers and what have you. And those are teams that do have some skill. Like Detroit's has the ability to put pucks in the back of the net. So I think that's encouraging. But I think if the Bruins stick to this identity and they have strong, close games against some of these teams, I think that should validate the fact that, yeah, they're buying into this identity, buying into this approach. And if they stick to it, doesn't matter if it's the Flyers or the Red Wings or a team like Vancouver or the Oilers who are expected to be in the mix for a deep playoff run. I think that validates and gives more belief to the Bruins that if they keep on playing this style of game, they're going to be in most of these matchups. And I think that's an important thing. And it's probably the most used word that was said after Saturday's game was belief. They're saying like, it's one thing to, see the results out there, but to, come back in a third period and beat the Flyers the way they did for these games where they're really limiting chances, to be rewarded for playing that way after, I think, being so rudderless for the first 6+ weeks of the year. I think that's really encouraging for the team. So sticking with it and hopefully seeing the results follow is going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, and I also think there are some guys you really need to get going. Like Elias Lindholm's still at 13 points. Yeah. If he can find a way to break out on this trip, this isn't an easy trip. I mean, again, it's not an easy trip because it's different times and you're going through time zones and you're going deep out west on the continent. But again, Winnipeg's second in the Central with 40 points, or tied for first in the Central with 20 wins and 40 points. But then again, like Vancouver, third in the Pacific with 32 points. Edmonton is the first wild card spot, 32 points. Calgary right outside the wild card with 31. Seattle right behind with 29. And then who's the other team? Did I do all five? Let me see. Winnipeg,
yeah.
1, 2,
yeah. Seattle.
I did.
Vancouver. Yes.
I got all of them. I can't count it anymore. I'm getting too old. All these podcasts are finally weighing on me. But like, you should do okay. Like, you should do okay. I want to get into sort of how this trip could be maybe the biggest of the season, which sounds insane, but we are at the point of the year where like everything matters for the trade deadline and where you're trying to go. But if you're trying to go somewhere, you should go there with Game Time. Like, if you want to go watch a game, there's only one place to do it because there's nothing like watching the game live. Sitting at home is comfy. It is. We can all admit, like, laying back on the couch, sweatpants, sweatshirt on a cold night. Yep, it's fun. But being there is always, always better. And the energy in the building, the sounds on the ice or the court, the memories you make with those around you, it's unmatched. And you can make these memories with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. When I use Game Time, I love the flash deals. They get me discounted prices, which is in 2024 and going into 2025. 2025 should be the year of the discounted price. And Game Time has that.
I hope so.
With the flash deals. Yeah, they do. And I agree with you. I hope there's a lot of more discounted prices in 2025. But Game Time certainly has them. And who doesn't love seat views? They give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Connor?
Game time.
It's game time. That's what time it is. So I find this trip an interesting time because it's sort of like this is a weird, like, very specific to me analogy. Like in high school when you're in like an AP class and it's really hard. That was sort of like the Bruins the first month and you're not fit for it. So they move you down to like honors or like a regular level. And you get like a good 2 weeks before your first test in that class and you're killing it. Like you're getting all the material, you're getting it down. That was sort of like the Bruins over that 7-2 run. Like they're real tests obviously for them, but they're not high-end teams that they were playing. Now you're facing the high-end teams. This is like they're like a big exam, right? This West Coast trip, it's a big exam. And I'm full of analogies recently. Dunk's breakfast sandwich, high school. This is insane.
Locked in.
It's that time of year. But for the Bruins, this is big in terms of what's their outlook the rest of the year. If they go on this West Coast trip and they're like 4-1, or 5-0 or something, or 3-1-1, we're sitting here in 2 weeks going, all right, well, they're in second or third in the Atlantic. I mean, the third right now, I know they have games on everybody, but they're second or third in the Atlantic. They're they look like a playoff team. They look revitalized. Everything seems to be headed in the right direction. Okay, what are you doing at the deadline? Who are you buying, or what assets are you selling off? Whereas if they are 2-2-1 or 1-3-1 or 0-5, you're sitting here going, all right, probably a middle of the pack team that you don't really look to add a lot to at the deadline. Do you share that as well? Do you think these 5 games could be sort of what they're going to be the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be critical. I mean, how many times have we seen it, Evan, where they have stretches of 1 or 2 games where they feel like they're trending in the right direction, or really, finding their game, and they take 2 steps back. And again, I give them credit. They're in their first 4-game win streak, so things are looking up, and I think you're seeing them build their games. But it's the same thing with what we've said before. You're going to have reservations until they start beating some of these tougher teams. And I do think it's something where I'm not ready to say this team has fully turned the corner until they, have those same results against teams that have their sights set on a cup. Not saying the Bruins are in that mix or in that tier right now, but you look at Edmonton, you look at
they were preseason. They were before the year.
No, without a doubt. Yeah. And so, listen, I think it's more validated that if they come out of this road trip with a winning record, or, as I said before, some of these games that are competitive, but they come out on the wrong end, the short end of the stick, kind of like the Vancouver game at home. If you play like that, it sucks. It's really frustrating when you don't get those results. But if you're taking the big picture approach, you'd be like, all right, you play like you did against Vancouver, you're going to win 85% of those kind of games, right?
Yes.
That's something that's not what people want to hear, and it's frustrating. And if you're a shut volume team, those games suck when you don't win. But you look at the eye test and how if they can kind of commit to this identity and keep on building it and win a couple more of these games, I think it validates that this is a team that should be a tough out if they make the playoffs. And I think right now it's all about just making the playoffs. I think Bruins fans are sick of finishing first or second in the Atlantic. Hell, they maybe just want to be a third seed and start on the road, or be a wild card team and see where that kind of takes you. Maybe that's the best path. But I think for them, it's all about sticking to their own game, kind of keep on building what they want to build under Sacco, and this approach that they've had ever since he's taken over, and see kind of where the chips fall from there. And again, they're in a good spot where, as you said, the Bruins have played a lot of games, but they played 29 games. They have 33 points. Florida's only played one fewer game than them, and they're only up by 3 points. They're, it's not like it's a seismic gap where all of a sudden we're waiting for an inevitable push from Tampa that's going to knock them out of playoff contention. Even if Tampa wins a couple more games, I think they played 25, to start the year. Worst case, the Bruins get bumped to the wild card right now, right? So,
yep.
They have benefited from the fact that no team in the East, especially, has really taken off. That they drop out of the Atlantic, they're all of a sudden out of a wild card spot because the Metro is not doing all that hot either. So they're in a good spot where they are right now. It's all about, I think, just keep on building their game. That, again, does not mean that they're going to go 5-0 or hopefully not 0-5. But if they stick to the process, I think you can draw silver linings out of how they play in these next couple of games. But it's going to fall on them. If they go to Winnipeg, lose 4-1, and then lose to Vancouver 5-0, and Oilers, light them up, then we're right back where we were, right? And that's the one thing you don't want to be. You don't want to take 3 steps back after you see some of the progress being built as of late. So it is going to be critical for this team to at least be competitive and see kind of where the chips fall, I think, is the most important thing for right now as we're assessing this team. And we can change those expectations. If they go 4-1, then all right, then that is the expectation moving forward of they should be competitive whoever they play. And when you look at how they play and their strategy, they should be a tough out. Even if they're boring, if they're locking down grade A ice and they're physical and they're wearing teams down, they should be in all of these games. Like, that is, I think, the most important thing. It's just all about sticking to that identity that I think is going to be key for this team.
Well,
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, but you hit the nail on the head there in that, like, people I think are going to be mad because the rest of the year, they say, oh, the Bruins are such a boring team. And it's like, well, if this team wants to win, do anything come April and May, like, they're going to have to be boring. They're going to have to be a boring team because they don't have that skill. You know, they're not high flying. They're not going to be dangling teams and winning 7-3 or things like that should not be their game plan at all. If they start to do that, like, great, I guess. But, like, this is a physical defensive team. This is a team that's going to have to block a lot of shots and get good goaltending and clamp things down in their own zone and win games 4-2. And it's not always going to be exciting. But Bruins fans should be happy if they just win. But if they don't, well, then
we get another issue.
That's a whole other issue, which we had in the first month. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we'll have covered every step of the way, whether it's recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. So you can read my stuff over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That is Conor Ryan. I am Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.